To God be the glory, great things he has done. So loved him the world that he gave us his son, who yielded his life and atonement for sin, and opened the life gate that all may go in.
Thanks for tuning in to No Trash, Just Truth, a podcast of Proverbs 9:10 Ministries.
With your hosts, Chris Paxson and Rose Spiller. Be sure to check out our other podcast, 5 a.m. Theology, available on all platforms.
And give him the glory, great things he has done.
Welcome back. Well, unless you just arrived on Earth or was just born yesterday, you know that AI is everywhere and it's infiltrating every sector of society, even the church. And in light of that, Chris, we wanted to spend an episode delving more deeply into it. Now, AI is a really complex issue. So to start us off, we thought we'd have an expert tell us about it.
AI is kind of a fancy thing. It's, first of all, it's 2 letters. It means artificial intelligence. But ultimately what it is it's about machine learning.
Okay, well, we hope that made things crystal clear to you. So have a blessed day.
Oh,
obviously, there's a lot more to AI than the fact that it's just 2 letters.
Oh my, you can't make this stuff up. You just can't. While AI's origins are 100 years old, believe it or not, it seems like in the last 10 years, it's skyrocketed as far as what it's capable of, and there doesn't seem to be any indication that it's going to stop. So how should we approach artificial intelligence? Is Elon Musk right when he said it poses a fundamental risk to the existence of human civilization? I mean, Rose, we're of the age that we saw that, those movies
Yes.
of a future where machines took over and people could hardly do anything to fight them.
That's right.
Or are others right when they say with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demons? How about those who say that there's only a 10 to 20% chance things go bad, but an 80% chance that AI will be beneficial for everybody? And then there are those in the middle who say AI will be the best thing and the worst thing for humanity both.
Yeah. Now, before we get too ahead of ourselves, Chris, you said it's got a 100-year history, which is surprising. So let's look at the history of it. AI's origins can be traced back to the mid-20th century. And yes, that was 100 years ago. There was a man named Alan Turing, and he began foundational work on AI, although he didn't call it that, in the 1930s. In 1936, Turing proposed the concept of what he called the Turing machine. Now, the original Turing machine was just a theoretical model. It wasn't a physical machine. His purpose was to investigate the limits of mathematical computation by a machine. In 1928, going back a few years before this, David Hilbert posed what's called the decision problem. And this question was whether a universal mechanical method exists that could determine the truth or the falseness of any given mathematical statement within a formal system. Now, even though Turing's machine was only theoretical at that time, he proved that such a universal method is impossible because there's no way to know whether another arbitrary program will finish or whether it'll keep running forever. Now, I know I kind of sound like Kamala Harris's word salad, but in a nutshell, Turing was trying to figure out if there's a way to assess a machine's intelligence and if machines could think for themselves, if they could keep going on thinking far past what humans tell them to think. In 1950, he wrote a paper titled Computing Machinery and Intelligence, and in it, he proposed a measure for determining whether a machine could exhibit intelligent behavior that could simulate and mimic all aspects of human intelligence and human behavior.
This all may sound confusing, but the important takeaway is that Turing's machine and work laid the foundation for the modern day computer. In the 1950s, computing machines, as they were called then, essentially functioned as large-scale calculators. They weren't widely used, though. In fact, when organizations like NASA needed an answer to some specific calculations, like the trajectory of a rocket launch, they still turned to human quote unquote computers or teams of women. They were women tasked with solving those complex equations rather than trust a computer. Proponents of these early computers weren't giving up, though. In 1956, through a man named John McCarthy, Dartmouth Workshop established AI as a formal research field. This is widely considered the founding moment of AI. The group believed that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can, in principle, be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it. The workshop's researchers began to explore building these quote unquote thinking machines, and later they officially coined the term artificial intelligence for their research. Inspired by this workshop, in 1952, a man named Arthur Samuel developed the first program that was capable of learning to play checkers. A couple of other men created programs that could make AI mimic human problem-solving abilities. This early research and work on AI programs focused on encoding human knowledge into programs through logic and symbolic reasoning.
In 1957, an artificial neural network, they call it ANN, was created. This was a computer system that mimicked the structure and function of the human brain. It was actually able to learn from data inputted, and it was able to make decisions. Now, it's composed of interconnected neurons, as they call them, which were organized in layers. There was an input layer that received the data. Then there was one or more hidden layers that processed the data. And then there was an output layer, which provided the result or the prediction. If you ever saw the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie with Gene Wilder, they had a rendition of this. And I think the movie's from the 60s.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, a man was demonstrating this machine. He inputs the data so the machine will predict where the golden tickets can be found. And the machine spit out something silly. I don't remember it was. Something like, why should I tell you? Or something like that. But anyway, they had it in the movie. Anyway, ANNs or ANNSs used those layers we mentioned to identify patterns in data. This made them useful for things like image recognition, natural language processing, and financial forecasting.
In 1966, the first chatbot was created. It was called Eliza. It was created by a man at MIT and was used for therapy. It used an input set of rules and transformed the user statements into questions, mimicking how a real therapist would interact with a patient by reflecting their words back to them in the form of a question. This chatbot didn't have any kind of understanding. It was just spitting out what it was programmed to do. However, it was so convincing that many users were convinced that they were actually speaking to an actual therapist. Some even developed an emotional attachment to the chatbot, much like they would their own human therapist. This became a phenomenon known as the Eliza effect.
Now, the 1970s and 80s rolled around and became known in the AI research world as the AI winters. The early optimism of the 50s and 60s began to wane, and there was reduced funding for AI research, and there was less and less interest in even developing it. Progress in AI over this time was slow, and the early overambitious expectations of AI began to fizzle out. But that all changed in the 1990s. In 1997, IBM developed a program called Deep Blue, and it became the first computer program that was actually able to defeat a reigning world-class chess champion. It was a guy named Garry Kasparov. It was a 6-game match, and the computer won. And then in the 2000s and 2010s, a process called AI deep learning was created. And that was based on those earlier neural network models, that ANN, that used layers to compute data and mimic human intelligence. But one thing different about this was that the machine was actually able to learn from its mistakes, and the machine was able to get smarter. About the same time, researchers also developed GPUs, or graphic processing units. And this proved huge in processing large amounts of data, as well as being able to parallel process data at the same time. So GPUs can divide a large task into smaller chunks and process them all at the same time. This was a huge breakthrough.
Yeah, GPUs were originally created for video games and animations. They're essential for these complex graphics they need and this fast-paced play that's in the modern video games today. They've also become invaluable in a lot of professional applications that use high def and 3D graphics too. When the 2020s hit, there was an AI explosion, growing far beyond just being useful for realistic video games and graphic art and design. AI was unleashed on the general public. Programs like ChatGPT emerged in 2022. ChatGPT allows the user to create content like text and images just from a simple prompt by the user. Today, just a few years later, there are many AIs out there. X has Grok, Google has Gemini, Microsoft has Copilot, Apple has Apple Intelligence, etc. We could go on. AI can answer any question you ask it by quickly scanning the internet for the answer. It can write a paper or even a book for you. It can instantly translate languages. It can perform automated tasks. And Rose, I'm going to tell you, somebody was helping me try to figure out something, I forget, just something simple about going on vacation or whatever. And they told me this story that they were at a hotel with their family and they were up on the roof and they were looking for like some paddles to play, like, I wasn't tennis, but I think it was, what's the other game called? Not,
Pickleball?
it's like tennis. Well, I don't know. They were looking for paddles. Yeah, maybe it was table tennis or I don't know what it was. Anyway, so they were looking for these paddles on the roof. So most of the time we would say, well, we have to call down to the front desk or whatever. They asked ChatGPT, and within seconds, they were told to go like through this one door and then look around the corner, and there were the paddles, and that's where they were.
That's crazy.
It's insane, isn't it?
That is crazy. That's like GPS on a whole new level.
It sure is. I mean, they just did it on a fluke, like just to see what would happen, and told them exactly where to find them.
That's crazy.
Without calling the front desk.
That's crazy.
Insane.
Other uses for AI, it can assist the medical profession by fully assessing a patient's health, diagnosing diseases or other issues, assisting with operations. They have robots who do operations now. And continuously reading the functioning levels of a person's body and warning them when something's off. My husband and I always laugh at that Cardia Mobile where you always know what your heart's doing. And we're always like, sometimes there's too much information.
I don't want to know any of that.
I don't either. But AI regulates IV medicines given and instantly reads vitals. And they're finding more and more uses for it every day in the medical field. It's used in the legal field. It assists lawyers and judges and even plaintiffs and defendants by instantly finding precedent or citing a law. And Chris, you just gave an example. It's used every day by millions of people who just want to know something.
Yeah.
I just used it to find out the ending of a series Ed and I were binge watching. I didn't like the series anymore because it got way too bad with the cursing and it was just getting raunchy and I just couldn't watch it anymore. But I wanted to know how it ended. So I just spoke into my phone. How did such and such a series end? And boom, the whole ending came up.
Yeah, Rose, like I said, I was talking, it was my hairdresser. I was talking to her about, had some question about, I was wondering about what would be the best place to do this on vacation or whatever. And she's like, do you ever use ChatGPT? And so then I downloaded it, and it has been useful. I mean, there's, plenty of things you want to know, but yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
So all of this seems like it's a pretty good thing, but is it? Is AI making us all smarter or dumbing us down and negating the need for human contact? Is it hurting or helping our economy, our workers, and businesses? And maybe the most important questions we as Christians should be asking is there a dark side to AI? Is it summoning demons, as one man suggested? Will it help or hurt our study of the Bible? Will we be fooled as AI creates sermons by some noted theologians, maybe making it sound as if they are spouting false teaching? Will pastors and Bible teachers rely on AI to write their sermons or their lessons? Can AI even create biblically sound material? These are all important things for us to think about and be ready for. And we haven't even delved into anything about facial recognition. And
That's right. Yeah, there's no doubt. It's moving faster than any of us can keep up with. But we'll look at some of these things. But you're right, Chris. Facial recognition, all that stuff. Well, let's start with looking at a few ways. And we'll start with something easy. Is AI making us smarter or is it dumbing us down? Well, you can easily learn facts and information. Like I said, I got the ending of a series. Your friend got where the rackets were. But let's talk about those facts and information. Even though AI does get more and more intelligent on its own, it is initially programmed with certain data and it's formulated with which initial websites it draws its information from. And this may surprise you. It didn't surprise me at all. And Chris, I'm guessing it's not going to surprise you. But the vast, vast majority of AI things, AI units, is liberal bent. Now,
not surprised.
No, and I'm not either. Given that's how it's initially programmed, as it gets smarter, it will continue on that liberal track for the most part. There is an exception, and we'll get to that later. But even X's Grok is liberal bent. And I know that's pretty surprising because Elon Musk is all about freedom of speech, but it is. So I know that doesn't answer, is it going to make you smarter or dumber? But if you rely on AI to answer everything, you're definitely going to start thinking more liberally.
You know, it's like getting answers to a test instead of studying for it. You're fed the answers. And sometimes, you know, Rose, sometimes there's an okay part of that. But if you really want to know what George Washington thought about Thanksgiving, for example, instead of researching and reading about George Washington and his faith and what caused him to make a very Christian statement about Americans being thankful to our merciful and sovereign God, you'll just get the answer to your question. You've learned a fact about a man, but you haven't learned about the man himself and everything else that went into making that statement. So AI can give us facts, but it doesn't give us real knowledge. It's like Vodi Bakum said, no one reads big books anymore. No one invests a lot of time in things anymore. AI is a big part of that. You don't need to read the 1,200 pages of Les Mis when you can just get a 1-minute read to get a synopsis of the book.
Now, is that a bad thing? Well, Chris, it all ties in. It's a lot like when you turn a book into a movie. You watch the movie and think, oh, this is great. And you think that's what the book was about. But when you actually read the book, you realize it's very different and has a lot more layers and is a lot more complex. Because the movie is someone else's interpretation or vision of the book. And that's what AI does. Like we said, while it may be able to think, it starts off with another person's mindset. So what you're getting is not necessarily factually accurate or the complete story. You used Les Mis as an example. So just to test it, I asked Grok to tell me what Les Mis is about, and here's what I got. And I'm quoting. Les Mis is an epic tale of redemption, justice, revolution, and love set in the early 19th century France. It follows ex-convict Jean Valjean as he tries to rebuild his life while relentlessly pursued by the uncompromising police inspector Javert against the backdrop of poverty, rebellion, and moral struggle. It's huge, philosophical, and mixes heartbreaking tragedy with hope.
So AI just put 1,200 pages into one short paragraph. Now, granted, 1,200 pages is a lot of pages to read, but when you do, you learn a lot of history of the French Revolution. But more importantly, Les Mis has many themes running through it about grace and faith and salvation. It's a masterpiece showing how the tracks of two lives are so very different, and the base of those lives is one man accepted and embraced the grace Jesus offers and lives his life in light of that, while the other spends his life working to try and earn merit with God and expects others to do the same thing as him. And when there's a failure, there's no grace, only judgment. And these Christian themes run throughout the book in all of the characters. But you didn't get any picture of any of that with the AI paragraph. And why is that? Well, most likely because the biblical agendas and principles in the book wasn't on the agenda of the original creator of Grok. It wasn't something he was going to input.
Right. It can get smarter, but it has to be initially start somewhere.
Yep.
AI isn't just gaining use in finding out facts instead of reading books for ourselves. Kids and adults in school are using it to write their whole papers. Now, there's a website that when you write a paper in high school and college, you have to submit your paper to it, and it goes through and checks to make sure you didn't plagiarize anything. Usually, you have to show the teacher that you've put it through and you didn't plagiarize. And the idea is the teacher wants to make sure you didn't just copy and paste material from your sources. But with AI, this isn't an issue anymore because it will write you the paper. So you're not plagiarizing something word for word, it's writing it for you. Now, to combat this, there are more programs coming out and they're trying to educate teachers on how to spot papers written by AI. But like we said, it's moving so fast and AI keeps getting smarter. It's able to get around these programs almost as fast as they release them. So at the end of the day, you have AI write a paper for you. What have you learned? Why are you even in school? You can graduate with a degree that you used AI to help you get. And if you do, what good are you in the work world?
That could be your next doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness.
I know it's a horrible thought, isn't it? And that leads to the answer to the next question. Does AI help or hurt the economy and businesses? Well, it definitely hurts businesses when they hire someone out of college thinking that they're going to get a good industrial engineer, but actually they get a person that used AI to get through college. And on the flip side, it hurts the economy because maybe there's a person that didn't use AI and is a fabulous industrial engineer, but can't get a job because businesses are making that job automated. From a business standpoint, a robot doesn't get sick, it doesn't take vacations, it doesn't need health insurance. Once you put out the initial money to get it, you don't even have to pay it. Now, on the business side, this may be good, but you've just taken all of this away from a human being who was counting on it to make a living. And there is a cost, not just to workers being put out of jobs, but also to businesses using AI. Setting up automation is extremely expensive initially. So for smaller businesses who can't afford this output of money in the beginning, they won't be able to compete. Other drawbacks are malfunctions. We've all had our phones and computers act up, and it's frustrating. Imagine when that's happening and holding up millions of dollars of production.
And like we keep saying, AI is getting smarter, but it's still designed to work as program. It still can't fully rationalize like a human. It's not flexible like a human. If something unexpected comes up, like in automation or something, a person can think through and adjust to address the problem. AI doesn't have that capability, not yet. And a big risk of AI is cybersecurity. There's a whole big area that we're seeing this play out. Cyber attacks, keeping data private, and the risk of AI being used by some really bad actors to create attacks on banks, companies, utilities, the government, whole cities, whole countries. This is why President Trump and his administration have been so focused on getting AI based in the US so that what we use as AI isn't coming from a foreign country. But what about countries who can't do that? And as we've seen, even if the US is hosting AI, foreign actors are still able to infiltrate it and wreak havoc on countries, on economies, like we said, on everything.
Yeah, I mean, this can be totally life changing for the entire world at some point.
Yes.
So before we talk about if AI is coming from a dark place or maybe is even demonic, let's look at what AI could mean for Christians. Will it help or will it hurt our study of the Bible? Will we be fooled as AI creates sermons by some noted theologians, making it sound like they're spouting false teaching? Will pastors and Bible teachers rely on AI to write their sermons and their lessons? Can AI even create biblically sound material? We mentioned in the episode where we interviewed worldview teacher Ann Sheridan that there are already sermons being put out using a well-known preacher, and in this case it was Vodi Bakum, and creating a whole sermon by him that he never gave. AI can use audio files to duplicate the voice of anybody. At the moment, it isn't able to duplicate the passion and animation of a person, and it's not able to duplicate the little quirks that we consistently have when we speak, like Vodi often saying, okay, after he makes a point. An AI Vodi's voice is pretty monotone and even-keeled, and that's a dead giveaway that it's a fake, but it might not always be the case that it's that way.
That's right. And who knows if they'll make fake sermons of credible theologians saying some really unbiblical things to influence people or to make it seem like they didn't believe what they once said they believed. And that leads to another problem with AI and Christianity. Is it going to affect our study and understanding of Scripture? Chris, you and I spend many, many hours praying about, researching, studying, and writing episodes. And I'd imagine it's much like a pastor working on writing a sermon, or maybe they do more work than we do. But now there's a website that I use all the time called openbible.com. And what you do is you put a subject in and it produces a list of verses pertaining to that subject. Now, I find it really helpful when we're doing topical episodes because it allows me to pinpoint many verses on that subject. And what I do, which is probably what you do, is I open my Bible to the verse they cite, look at the surrounding verses and the context of the verse. Often I'll look up several commentaries by trusted sources on that verse. But this site's a great place to start. But now when I try to go into it, immediately Google AI's answer comes up first at the top of the screen, giving me a verse and a full explanation of that verse on the topic. How easy would it be for me to copy and paste that answer? Now, sometimes I'll admit that AI gives a decent interpretation of the verse, but not always. But decent interpretation or not, never should we be relying on artificial intelligence for Bible study because guess what? A computer can't be indwelt by the Holy Spirit. So the answer you get may sound good. It may even be pretty accurate, but it's not coming from a godly place. I mean, even Joel Osteen and Beth Moore get things right sometimes.
Right. So we decided to test this out. We asked AI to interpret the verse, Matthew 19, verse 26, which says, "But Jesus looked at them and said, 'With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible.'" When you understand the context surrounding this verse, you see that Jesus is talking about salvation. The gist is that after his encounter with the rich young ruler, Jesus' apostles asked who can be saved. And Jesus tells them, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. In other words, there is nothing man can do to save themselves, but God is able to bring it about. When I asked AI to interpret Matthew 19:6, this is what I got. And I'm quoting the AI's answer here. The phrase, "with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible," means that while human power and understanding have limits, God's power is infinite and can accomplish what is beyond human ability. It signifies that human limitations are not God's limitations, encouraging faith in God's ability to work miracles, provide strength, and bring about outcomes that seem impossible. The verse from the New Testament book of Matthew is often used to offer hope during difficult challenges by reminding believers to trust in God's power. Boy,
Sounds
is that
like
off.
the prosperity gospel.
Yes, it does.
Here's another one that we did. Romans 1, 26 to 27. And that says, "For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions, for their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise, gave up natural relations with women, and were consumed with passion for one another. Men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. Now, in this verse, Paul uses the word natural relations as opposed to contrary to nature. Natural relations is referring to the marital order that God intended way back in Genesis. Marriage is one man and one woman. The term contrary to nature would thus mean that it goes against God's natural order of things. So homosexuality, which Paul is obviously talking about here, is not just an alternative lifestyle. According to Scripture, it's an unnatural lifestyle, one that's in rebellion against God. It's the person being God of their own life. They're in complete disobedience to what God says. And it's basically publicly and continually flipping off God and his decree. And since we're going to read the AI interpretation in a minute, I want to add this first. Paul does speak about idolatry and man giving up the truth for a lie, even though the truth has been made plain to him, and God giving these people up to the lusts of their hearts. These verses in Romans about homosexuality are Paul telling us what the result of all that is. So it's definitely about the sin and perverseness of homosexuality. Paul is saying when you have other gods in your life, when you give up the truth for a lie, even though the truth has been made plain to you, God will give you over to your sin and your lusts. And one of the big ones that come out of it is homosexuality. And we can all clearly see that.
Progressives and liberals, even those who call themselves Christians, like to argue that Jesus never said anything against homosexuality and that Paul is not specifically saying homosexuality is a sin, but adultery and sleeping around is. So as long as you're in a monogamous homosexual relationship, God's good with it. That's what they say. And we tell you that because here is how two AI sources interpreted those Roman 1 verses. Google AI says this: Paul is explaining why and how God judges humanity. He argues that all people have suppressed the truth about God that is evident in creation. They exchanged the worship of the true God for idolatry. The acts presented by Paul are just an illustration of humanity's deeper rebellion against the Creator's design. Google AI's interpretation is not completely wrong, but it's misleading and has serious errors. First of all, Paul is talking about unrighteous men suppressing the truth, meaning unbelievers, not all people. Second, here we see the liberal bent on this. They're glossing over the actual sin of homosexuality and putting it under the umbrella of idolatry. You would think that Grok on X would do better since Elon Musk is a big proponent of free speech, but Grok is actually worse. Here's how it interprets Romans 1:26 and 27. In Christian theology, the interpretation of these verses is that same-sex sexual activity is a result and a sign of humanity's broader foundational sin, the deliberate rejection and exchange of the Creator for created things, in parentheses, idolatry.
Now, again, while it's true that homosexuality is the result of having false gods, rejecting God's truth, exchanging the truth for a lie, it leaves out that God turns these people over to their sins and their lusts, as Paul says. It leaves out that homosexuality is actually a sin that needs to be dealt with and is a sin that comes out of a perverse and lustful and disobedient heart. Now, earlier, Chris, I mentioned that AI does change when you use it, and that is something pretty new with AI. AI does learn from your prompts. When I'm looking for commentaries on passages, I always search for reformed commentary on ... because I don't feel like listening to Christianity Today and all that other stuff. And I've done that a lot. So because I've done that a lot, now when Google AI pops up an answer, you can see that the answers are getting more conservative than they used to. But, and it's a big but, and the most important factor, again, AI is not indwelt with the Holy Spirit. It's spitting answers out. It's learning from my behavior to try to spit something out that I would like. It's not coming from a godly place at all. And Chris, that leads to the last question that we're going to look at pertaining to AI. Is AI demonic or coming from a dark place? Is it summoning demons as that one man suggested?
Well, a couple of years ago, we did an episode called UFOs and Other Strange Things. It was episode 218. And I want to quote from that episode. When Satan tempted Eve in the garden, he made the suggestion that God was withholding some secret knowledge from them. And then Satan lied and said surely they would not die. That was all it took for our first parents to take the leap. The promise of secret knowledge was enough of a temptation to make them doubt God and disobey him. Mankind's lust for knowledge and power has been on a roll ever since. Man's lust has never stopped, nor has Satan's willingness to help humans who are willing to bow down to him. As John MacArthur says, demons possess knowledge which man does not have, and they are willing under certain circumstances to communicate this to man. Pharaoh's wise men and sorcerers were able to mimic some of the same things that Moses did. They weren't doing sleight of hand magic tricks. Their magic was powered by something, demonic power. So that's the end of the quote from our episode. For most of us, how would you even go about creating and cultivating artificial intelligence is mind-blowing. Only a very few have had that kind of knowledge, and it's quite possible that it came from demons. We just don't know.
And Chris, some of what AI is being used for, not just influencing people's thinking and dumbing us down, but it's made the dark web more accessible. Porn, child and women trafficking, grooming, plotting terrorism, and so many other evil things are so much more accessible. It's given individuals who are bent on evil the opportunity to group together and plot. So there's no doubt, at least in my mind, that part of it is demonic and being used for Satan's purposes. But as God always does, as Genesis 50:20 tells us, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. So there are positives and good things that Christians can take from AI. Just reverse all those evil things. We can bring awareness over the web of things like porn and child porn and trafficking and grooming and terrorism. Individuals who are bent on spreading the truth of God can reach more people and group together for their purpose. And since AI does learn from our prompts and requests, we can get it to change what it spits out.
Yeah, the bottom line with AI is go ahead and use it. Be careful with it. Don't rely on it to take the place of real knowledge and real Bible study, but you can use it for good, and you can use it to glorify God. What could be better revenge than that against its darker purposes?
Amen. And that's where we're going to end. Have a blessed day, everyone.
And give him the glory, great things